Hi everyone, today's recipe is going to be flan. Now flan I feel gets a bad rep for being a difficult recipe, and I think it's just a little bit misunderstood. There really is only one part of the recipe that can be challenging and time sensitive, and that is the very first section, which is the sugar syrup for covering the molds. For this recipe we'll be doing a dry sugar base. It's a little easier than the water based version. We'll need a pot or a pan to make our sugar. Use a medium high heat setting. Put a little sugar and let it start melting. When about 50% of it has melted, continue to add more sugar gradually and mixing around with a wooden spoon. You can go slow with this process, you don't have to crank the heat up all the way, but it does have to be relatively high for the sugar to melt. We need the sugar to have flow but not be very dark, because the darker it gets the bitter it will become and it will not have the taste we wanted. As we add more sugar, continue to mix with the spoon evenly throughout the whole process. Unlike other sugars, we can actually mix it with a spoon. If we were to add water to it, it would be a different story. You should be looking for a dark and yellowish tone in the sugar as you scoop it out of the pot. It will flow quite easily as it is very hot, but it will harden a fair amount when it cools down, so we need to work quite quickly. We want to move straight into pouring a small but considerable amount into our molds. Use a cloth when handling the molds because the sugar is very hot and the molds will get very hot as well. Depending on the size of the molds you use, you may need to use more sugar or less sugar. If you put too much, it's okay, just use it for another mold instead. We used stainless steel this time around because it's all we had, but we had some trouble with them. It's hard to get the sugar to attach to the sides, and it cools very quickly when on the mold, which made it hard to properly cover the sides. So for the molds, perhaps using porcelain is best. I believe they're called rain skins, so you get yourself one of those for an easier time. Our molds are around 240 mils, so look for something similar to use the same cooking times as us. Going back to the recipe, cover the sides and bottom of the mold with the syrup, and you can go ahead and let them rest at room temperature while we prepare the flan mix. For this recipe we'll need the following ingredients: 400 grams of Dulce de Leche, 10 eggs, 1 liter of full cream milk, and 200 grams of sugar. Start first by beating the Dulce de Leche and eggs together. You can do this all at once, or add half the eggs and whisk and add the other half later. Whatever you like really. Just make sure they are very well mixed. You have to whisk fairly aggressively, I would say. Make sure you're ready for a bit of workout doing this as it gets rather thick. My forearm was not too happy with me doing it. Once we got that mixed well, we need to add the sugar and whisk a little to incorporate it into the mix. Lastly, add the milk and mix gently, otherwise you can make a mess like I have by mixing a little too hard. Time to pour our mixture into the molds. You want to leave about 1 centimeter from the top of the molds. It's not that they rise, but it's a lot easier to handle this way. Make sure your oven is preheated to 140 degrees Celsius. We'll need a large reservoir to place our molds because they need to rest in a body of water that reaches about half the height of the mold. If you want the molds not to slide around, place a couple of paper towels underneath, and that should give them some friction, preventing them from sliding around. Cover all the molds with a sheet of aluminium so they don't dry out in the oven. You can add water now, but that can be a challenge to move the whole thing to the oven. It would be really heavy and hard to maneuver, especially if the oven is down low. So my suggestion is to fill the reservoir when you have it in the oven. You can use boiling water from the kettle if you want to speed up the process a little bit. Flan can take quite a bit of time to cook. These little molds took about 1 hour to cook. You can check if it's done by lightly tapping the top of the flan, and it has this ripple effect. It's a very slight ripple effect. So depending on the mold you use, it may take a little less or more time to cook. Now that they're all done, we need to let them rest at room temperature for about half an hour and then place them in the fridge for a couple of hours, and they will be ready to be enjoyed. To get them out of the molds, place the molds in hot boiling water for about 5 to 10 minutes. You can try and dislodge them a little bit with a knife by running around the edges very gently. You should be able to press down on the edges of the flan and see it separate a little bit. We did struggle a little bit with our molds, but we did manage to get them out with some patience. You can enjoy them by themselves, add Dulce de Leche on the side, or cream, or both. That's all for this week. We hope you enjoyed. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and leaving a like on this video will help us out tremendously. Otherwise, I will see you all next week.